What if the secret to transforming your entire life wasn't found in some expensive seminar or a hidden book, but in the first hour of your day? Imagine if that quiet moment before the world wakes held the key to unlocking success, purpose, and power. Sounds too simple, right? But that's exactly what the world's greatest minds, Franklin, Aurelius, Hamilton, understood. And if you're ready to rise, truly rise, then this story is your call to action. Part 1. The Hour That Builds Empires, inspired by the principles of Napoleon Hill. Easy language. American audience. It was 4:59 a.m. The world was quiet. No traffic. No phone buzzing. Just silence. And in that silence, a 19-year-old named Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring into the dark. He wasn't rich. He wasn't special. He didn't come from a powerful family. But he had something most people didn't: a burning desire to change his life. 3 months ago, Daniel stumbled upon a dusty old copy of Think and Grow Rich at a flea market. The cover was cracked. The pages smelled like time. But as he flipped through it, something clicked inside him. Napoleon Hill wasn't just giving advice, he was handing over a blueprint. A guide to building a life of purpose, wealth, and peace. And the very first thing Daniel learned: the first hour of your day controls the rest of your life. Daniel realized that most people woke up reacting, hitting snooze, rushing to work, stressed before the day even began. They were slaves to the clock. But Hill's words were clear. Success comes to those who become success-conscious. And success-conscious people? They rise before the world wakes. So Daniel made a decision. No more sleeping in. No more letting the day control him. From now on, he would own his mornings. He set his alarm for 5 a.m. And every day since, he had kept that promise to himself. At first, it wasn't easy. The bed was warm. The world outside was cold. But every time he rose early, Daniel felt a little stronger, a little more in control. He didn't waste those precious hours. He used them. And that's the key. Mornings of meaning. Daniel's routine was simple but powerful. First 10 minutes. Gratitude. He listed everything he had, even when it wasn't much: his health, his family, the book in his hands. Next 20 minutes. Reading. Not scrolling social media. Not watching Netflix. But reading minds greater than his own. Napoleon Hill. Benjamin Franklin. Marcus Aurelius. Next 20 minutes. Writing. He wrote out his goals. Not vague wishes, but clear intentions. I will start my business by October. I will read 30 books this year. I will master discipline. Final 10 minutes. Silence. Meditation. He asked himself the same question Franklin once asked. What good shall I do this day? That was Daniel's golden hour. 60 minutes to shape the next 23. And it worked. Why it works: when you wake up early, really early, you aren't just beating the sun. You're training your mind. You're saying, I choose growth over comfort. And that choice, repeated daily, builds mental strength. It's like a gym for your soul. And the results? More clarity. No distractions mean sharper focus. More discipline. You start controlling your habits, not the other way around. More confidence. Every morning when stacks up. You feel stronger because you are stronger. Napoleon Hill called this the power of definiteness of purpose. When you know why you rise, everything else becomes easier. Daniel's turning point. One morning, as the sky began to brighten, Daniel sat in his tiny kitchen sipping black coffee. He had just written down his goals again when a thought hit him like lightning. This hour is where my future lies. It wasn't some big moment. No one clapped. No music played. But something shifted inside him. He realized that these quiet mornings weren't just routine. They were rehearsal. For the man he wanted to become. That same day, he pitched a business idea to a local mentor he met online. The idea wasn't perfect, but Daniel spoke with clarity and confidence. The mentor was impressed, not just by the plan, but by Daniel's presence. I can tell you've put in the work, the mentor said. You don't talk like most kids your age. You think deeply. You move with purpose. Daniel smiled. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew the truth. That confidence was forged in the dark, before dawn, in silence, when the world slept. The Franklin principal Benjamin Franklin, one of Daniel's new heroes, asked himself every morning, "What good shall I do this day?" And every night, "What good have I done?" Daniel began doing the same. And slowly, his answers changed. At first, his mornings were filled with hope. Later, they became filled with action. He didn't just dream. He did. He started a small online service, took online classes, began waking up with more fire than fear. His friends noticed. His family noticed. But most importantly, he noticed. Final thought for part 1. If you're reading this and thinking, "I'm not a morning person," here's the truth: either was Daniel. But he became one. Because success isn't about personality. It's about purpose. And if you want to change your life, change the way you start your day. Don't let the world wake you up. Wake up before the world, and meet your purpose head on. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings, don't hit snooze on your potential. Stand up. Show up. And remember, you're not just waking up early. You're rising into your greatness. Ready for part 2? In the next chapter, we'll discover how early rising becomes the foundation for mastering your mind, and why your thoughts shape your world long before your actions do. Part 2. The Secret Weapon of the Successful. Inspired by the philosophy of Napoleon Hill, in story form, simple and powerful, Daniel was changing. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in small, invisible shifts. He no longer scrolled through his phone the moment he opened his eyes. He didn't hit snooze anymore. And each day he rose at 5 a.m., something deep within him grew stronger. It had been 30 days since Daniel committed to owning his mornings. Most people in his neighborhood still slept soundly when he stepped into the cold, still dark kitchen. But for Daniel, this time wasn't lonely, it was sacred. He boiled water for tea, sat with his journal, read the pages of Hill's Think and Grow Rich like scripture. And as he wrote down his goals each morning, he noticed something. He was starting to believe in them. It wasn't always easy. Some mornings, Daniel didn't feel like getting up. His bed felt warm. The world outside felt heavy. And inside his head, that voice whispered, "Just one more hour." But Daniel remembered what Hill had written. "Do not wait. The time will never be just right." And so, he rose anyway. That's when he began to understand the truth about discipline. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It acts. One cold Thursday morning, Daniel's alarm buzzed at 5 a.m. sharp. He opened his eyes but didn't move. His body begged for more sleep. His dreams had been vivid and strange, and for a moment, he considered giving in. But something stronger inside him spoke up. It said, "Get up. This is who you are now." He threw off the covers, sat up, put his feet on the floor. He didn't feel like a warrior, but he acted like one. That was the difference. As Daniel lit the small desk lamp and opened his notebook, he wrote down something new at the top of the page. "Discipline is the gatekeeper of my potential." He looked at the words and realized they were true. Without discipline, his dreams stayed dreams. But with it, the impossible started to feel inevitable. He remembered reading about Anne Bradstreet, the first published poet in colonial America. She woke before dawn, stealing moments to write before the chaos of family life began. Her words became legacy. Or Blaise Pascal, the brilliant thinker whose most profound ideas came not in the rush of the day, but in morning silence. Their greatness wasn't an accident. It was crafted in solitude, just like this. Daniel's mornings became more than a habit. They became a ritual. A ritual of becoming. He'd read something that challenged his thinking, write something that focused his vision. Sometimes he'd just sit quietly and ask, "What kind of man do I want to be?" And then he'd act like that man, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard, because that's where character is carved, in the discomfort, in the choice to rise. His productivity began to multiply. By the time his friends were waking up, Daniel had already read 2 chapters of a book, written in his journal, planned his day, and exercised. He wasn't doing more to impress anyone. He was doing more because he had finally made time for what mattered. Mornings became his runway for the day ahead. Instead of crashing into his tasks, he launched into them. Like Hill said, "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." And Daniel's mind was finally clear enough to conceive. His friend Marcus noticed the change. "You've been different lately," he said one afternoon. "You're calmer. Focused. Like in control." Daniel smiled. "I just started waking up earlier." Marcus laughed. "That's it." "No," Daniel said. "That's the beginning." One morning, Daniel reread a line from Hill that struck deeper than ever. "You are the master of your destiny." He paused. Then he wrote his own version underneath. "I shape my life one morning at a time." That sentence stayed with him all day. Every decision he made, every challenge he faced, he returned to that simple truth. He was no longer reacting to life. He was designing it, just like the sculptor Thorvaldsen, who shaped stone in silence. Daniel was shaping his life in the early morning stillness. The power of early rising, Daniel realized, wasn't just in the hours gained, it was in who he became in those hours. He became more disciplined, more productive, more resilient. And resilience, he learned, wasn't just about being tough. It was about choosing strength over ease, over and over again. Booker T. Washington walked miles every morning just to attend school. Abigail Adams rose before dawn to write letters and study philosophy. Their greatness came not from comfort, but from commitment. Daniel now saw the morning as a training ground, not just for work, but for willpower. Some mornings he still struggled. The bed still whispered. The excuses still crept in. But now, he had a pattern to rely on. A reason to get up that was bigger than just another task. He wasn't waking up for a to-do list. He was waking up for who he was becoming. That evening, as Daniel walked past the mirror on his way to bed, he caught his reflection. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't just see the tired teenager with too many dreams. He saw a man in the making. One sunrise at a time. End of part 2 coming next in part 3. How mastering your morning thoughts gives you the power to shape your reality. And why what you think first thing in the day can either build you or break you. Let me know when you're ready. Part 3. The Mindset of Morning Power, inspired by the philosophy of Napoleon Hill. In story form, simple and powerful. The morning Daniel nearly gave up was the morning everything changed. He had been waking early for nearly 2 months. His body had adjusted, his habits were shifting, but something felt stuck. Progress wasn't as visible as he expected. His goals still felt far. Doubt was starting to whisper louder. That morning, the sky outside was still dark, and the wind scratched at the window like a warning. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, hands in his lap, wondering if this was all just wishful thinking. But then, his eyes caught something on the corner of his nightstand, a note he'd scribbled on a sticky pad a week earlier, barely remembering he'd written it. "Each morning I rise is proof I believe in myself." He stared at it. Slowly, something in his chest steadied. He rose. That morning, Daniel didn't open a self-help book. He didn't listen to a podcast. Instead, he sat at his small wooden desk, opened his journal, and asked himself one question. Who do I want to become? He didn't rush the answer. He just sat with it, letting the silence of the morning hold space for truth. Then slowly, he began to write. I want to become the kind of person who leads without noise, who inspires without shouting, who is steady when the world spins fast. I want to be thoughtful, grateful, brave. And as he wrote, a quiet realization settled in. He was already becoming that person, one early morning at a time. Daniel had once thought early rising was just about discipline. But he was beginning to understand it was about direction. Each morning was a fresh chance to set the tone, not just for the day, but for his life. When he rose with purpose, the rest of the day listened. His emotions followed his intentions. His actions followed his mindset. And it all began in the still, soft light of dawn. Napoleon Hill had written, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Daniel now understood that this wasn't just about thinking positively. It was about choosing his thoughts before the world chose them for him. One morning, after journaling and stretching by his window, Daniel imagined something, his future self. He pictured a confident version of himself walking into meetings, leading projects, mentoring others. That future version didn't seem far away. He could feel the thread connecting them. It was his morning mindset. The thoughts he chose now were the soil where that version would grow. Daniel wrote in his journal, "I am planting my future in the soil of this morning. I choose clarity. I choose courage." And every time he repeated that, he felt stronger. Daniel began experimenting with something new, what he called his morning trifecta. 1. Gratitude. He started by writing 3 things he was grateful for. Some days it was as simple as a warm blanket. Other days, a conversation with his mom. Gratitude shifted his focus from what was missing to what was already working. Point 2. Affirmation. Next, he'd speak affirmations aloud. I am focused. I am growing. I am enough. At first it felt awkward. But then, it felt like armor, words that wrapped around his heart before the world could wound it. Point 3. Learning. Finally, he would read 1 page of something challenging, something that expanded him. Some mornings it was a quote from a philosopher. Other mornings, a story of someone who had overcome odds far greater than his own. Each morning he repeated the process. And with each repetition, something inside him anchored. One Sunday morning, Daniel stood outside just before sunrise, wrapped in a hoodie. The air was crisp, but the sky was soft with promise. He whispered to himself, "This is how I begin. Not with noise, but with direction." That week, he noticed something strange. He was calmer in conversations. He listened more. He interrupted less. He wasn't rushing to prove himself anymore. He was beginning to trust himself. Because he no longer hoped for growth, he practiced it. One night, while closing his journal, Daniel thought about Florence Nightingale, how she found calm within chaos by beginning her days with reflection. Or Galileo, who rose early to study the stars while the world slept. They didn't rise early to impress anyone. They rose early because they were building something within. Daniel wrote, "The world may never see these mornings, but they are the moments shaping the man." Weeks passed. Then months. People started to notice. His teachers said he seemed more focused. His boss at the cafe said he handled stress better than most adults. Even his younger sister asked, "How do you stay so calm?" Daniel just smiled. He didn't tell them about the 5 a.m. alarms, the gratitude lists, the whispered affirmations in the mirror. He didn't need to. The results were speaking. Hill had said, "Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts." Daniel was learning that each morning wasn't just a reset, it was a rehearsal. A rehearsal for how he wanted to think, feel, and show up when life got hard. One morning, he wrote something he didn't expect. "I used to chase confidence. Now I build it." Because every time he woke up early, even when he didn't feel like it, he was telling himself, "I matter. My dreams matter. My discipline is stronger than my doubt." Confidence, he realized, isn't something that appears. It's something that's earned through action, through intention, through showing up for yourself when no one's watching. That evening, he met up with Marcus again, who asked, "What's your secret? You're always ahead of the game now." Daniel paused, then said, "It's not a secret. I just win the morning." End of part 3. Coming next in part 4. How Daniel learns to turn adversity into fuel, and how life's challenges become the training ground for greatness, when viewed through the lens of persistence and purpose. Let me know when you're ready for the next chapter. Part 4. The Fire Inside Failure, inspired by Napoleon Hill, told in simple, emotional story form. It was a Thursday when Daniel's first big failure knocked him flat. He had been working hard on a proposal for a new program at the youth center where he volunteered. He'd stayed up late for 3 nights in a row, researching, writing, refining. He believed in the idea. So did a few others. But when he presented it to the board, they rejected it. Not harshly. Just a simple, polite, "Thank you, but we're going in a different direction." Daniel nodded. Smiled even. But as he walked out of the building and sat on the park bench across the street, the weight of it dropped. "I gave everything to that," he whispered to himself. "What was the point?" The cold wind didn't answer. It just pushed harder at his coat. That evening, Daniel didn't do his usual journaling. He sat on his bed, phone off, lights dim, and stared at the ceiling. The silence didn't feel empowering like it usually did. It felt like a verdict. He almost didn't wake up early the next morning. His hand hovered over the alarm, ready to go back to sleep. But then he remembered something from one of the old Napoleon Hill books he'd read. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. He didn't feel it yet. But he got up anyway. At his desk, the words wouldn't come. No affirmations. No clarity. Just frustration. So he did something different. He wrote the word failure in big letters at the top of the page. And under it, he wrote every emotion he felt: disappointment, embarrassment, confusion, anger. He stared at them. Then he asked a question, out loud. What is this here to teach me? The answer didn't come right away. But that night, something shifted. He was talking to an older volunteer, Ms. Renee, who had seen the rejection too. She smiled kindly and said, "You think this was your big moment. But it was just your first rehearsal." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean? You think failure means you lost. It doesn't. It means you started. Most people never even do that." Daniel went home and opened his journal again. This time, the page flowed. "I thought success was a straight line. But it's not. It's a fight. Every no is not a stop sign. It's training. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the preparation for it." He underlined it twice. In the days that followed, Daniel began to study failure, his own and others. He read stories of people who had built empires after being fired, turned rejections into redirections, transformed pain into power. He read about how Thomas Edison tried 10,000 times before getting the light bulb right. About how Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. How Oprah was told she wasn't fit for TV. Every story echoed the same truth Hill had spoken. There's one quality that one must possess to win: definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants, and a burning desire to possess it. Daniel realized he had that desire. But he had to protect it, feed it, and keep walking even when the road cracked beneath him. One morning, after a week of quiet reflection, Daniel wrote a new mantra. "I am not afraid to fail. I am afraid to quit." He repeated it like a prayer. Then he added, "Every failure is a step forward if I learn. Every no means I'm getting closer to my yes. Every closed door forces me to build a better one." With that fire lit again, Daniel rewrote the youth center proposal, not to resubmit, but for himself. To learn. To grow. To improve, and while working on it, he had a new idea. Something smaller, more focused, and more actionable. A weekend workshop instead of a full program. He pitched it to one board member. She loved it. 3 weeks later, Daniel was standing in front of a group of 10 teenagers, leading his first official workshop about confidence, purpose, and yes, how to learn from failure. He didn't tell them about his rejected proposal. He told them about resilience. That night, he wrote, "I thought failure was the end of the road. But it was just a fork in the path. What looked like rejection was really redirection." A few months later, Daniel was invited to speak at a city event for young leaders. His topic? The power of starting over. He smiled to himself as he wrote the speech, because the boy who once thought failure meant the dream was dead, now knew better. Now he knew failure was just feedback. It wasn't personal. It was a puzzle. A question. A test. And Daniel had learned how to answer it. As Napoleon Hill once said, "Most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure." Daniel was no longer afraid of that step. He was walking right into it, with purpose in his eyes and fire in his heart. End of Part 4. Coming next in Part 5, Daniel discovers the true meaning of persistence, not just pushing forward, but doing so with patience, even when results are invisible. He learns the art of delayed rewards, and how to stay consistent when no one is watching. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Part 5. The Invisible Progress, inspired by Napoleon Hill's principle of persistence. Told as a story. 3 months had passed since Daniel's small workshop at the youth center. He was still waking up early. Still writing in his journal. still chasing his dream of creating something big, something that would help young people find purpose. But lately, nothing new was happening. No more workshop invites. No calls from the board. No emails. Silence. And it was starting to weigh on him. One morning, Daniel sat at his usual cafe spot, sipping lukewarm coffee, and staring at a blank page. His mind kept whispering, "What's the point? You're not making a difference. Maybe you got lucky once." That's when his phone buzzed out a message from an old college friend. "Man, I see you grinding. Respect. That workshop video inspired me to start my own coaching class. Keep going." Daniel stared at the screen for a long second. He hadn't even posted the workshop video himself. Someone from the youth center must have shared it. He smiled. Because the world had been quiet, but the impact was still rippling. That evening, he flipped back through his journal and found a quote he had copied from Napoleon Hill months earlier. "Patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success." He had the persistence. He had the effort. But what he was missing now was patience. Daniel remembered a story Hill told about a man who gave up digging just 3 feet away from gold. He thought he had failed. But he just didn't see how close he was. Daniel didn't want to be that man. So he changed his approach. Instead of chasing big breakthroughs, he started tracking tiny victories. 1 New journal entry equals a win. 1 Person helped equals a win. 1 Idea written down equals a win. 1 More day showing up equals a win. He called it his invisible progress tracker. Because, as he wrote, success is often quiet before it gets loud. To test this mindset, Daniel set a personal challenge: 90 days of consistent action, even if nothing happened. Every day, he would write 1 page of content, reach out to 1 person who could benefit from it, and reflect on 1 lesson from his day. No expectations. Just commitment. At first, it was exciting. Then, around day 17, it got boring. Around day 32, it got hard. But by day 45, something changed. Not outside. Inside. He didn't need applause anymore. He didn't crave fast results. He began to enjoy the process. The grind. The quiet work. It was no longer about being seen. It was about becoming solid. As he wrote in his journal, "When you fall in love with the process, success becomes inevitable." One afternoon during that 90-day challenge, Daniel gave a short talk to just 5 teenagers in a tiny library room. He almost said no because the audience was small, but he remembered something Hill once taught. "Persistence is to the character of man as carbon is to steel." He showed up anyway. Gave it his all. At the end of the talk, a 13-year-old girl waited until everyone else had left. Then she approached quietly. "My brother's in jail," she said. "You said we could rewrite our future. I want to learn how." Daniel gave her his notebook. Blank pages, except for 1 quote written at the top. "You are not your past. You are the author of your next chapter." She took it and held it like it was gold. In that moment, Daniel understood something deep. Impact isn't always seen, but it is always felt. The next few weeks brought more slow days, more quiet wins. But Daniel didn't flinch anymore, because now he knew. The seed grows underground before it breaks the surface. The roots go deep before the tree rises high. And success grows slowly, until it explodes. By day 90, Daniel had built a small but powerful following online. His daily posts had started getting shared. Teachers reached out. A podcast invited him. And the youth center offered to make his workshop a monthly series. But by then, he wasn't chasing recognition anymore. He was chasing alignment. He had become the kind of man who could keep going, even in silence, even when no one clapped, even when the results were invisible, because he understood now. Persistence isn't about pushing hard for a few days. It's about showing up for yourself, every day, no matter who's watching. End of part 5. Coming next in part 6, final part. Daniel receives his first major breakthrough, but realizes the real success was never in the applause. It was in who he became through the struggle. The series ends with a powerful final lesson from Hill. Success isn't a destination, it's a reflection of the man you forged while walking the path. Let me know when you're ready for the final part. Part 6. The Man You Become, inspired by Napoleon Hill's principle of personal growth through definite purpose. It was a quiet Monday morning when Daniel received the email. Subject: Speaking invitation, National Youth Leaders Summit venue, Washington, D.C. Audience: 2,000 plus educators, mentors, and students. They had seen his work online, heard about his workshops, read the stories. They wanted him on the main stage. He sat there for a moment, completely still. Then he smiled. Not because he finally made it, but because he didn't need it anymore. He had already won long before this invitation came. Rewind 6 months earlier, and Daniel would have jumped at the spotlight. He craved it, but the grind had changed him. The long months of invisible progress, the rejection, the silence, those had forged something stronger than recognition. Clarity. Maturity. Character. He replied yes to the invitation, but not as a man seeking validation. He replied as a man who had already discovered his value. The night before the big talk, Daniel was in his hotel room, pacing the floor. Not because of nerves, but because he wanted to get the message right. He thought of Hill's timeless words. You give before you get. You serve before you lead. You become before you receive. That was it. That was the core of it all. On stage, under the bright lights, Daniel looked out at the audience. He didn't read from notes. He spoke from the scars. 6 months ago, I spoke to 5 teenagers in a dusty library. No cameras. No applause. Just hearts that were ready. He paused. That's where I learned this. Success doesn't begin with recognition. It begins with responsibility. He shared the story of the girl whose brother was in jail, how her courage reminded him that every small action matters. He talked about his 90-day challenge. The discipline. The days he wanted to quit. The days no one saw. And then he said the line that stayed with everyone. When you start acting like the person you want to become, life eventually catches up. After the talk, people lined up to speak with him. A teacher said she was starting a journal club with her students. A teenager said he was going to reach out to his estranged father. A coach asked him to write a book. Daniel listened, smiled, thanked them, but what he really felt was peace, because now he understood. The real prize isn't the stage. It's the strength you build while walking alone. That night, Daniel sat by the hotel window, staring at the city lights below. He opened his old journal and wrote his final entry of the series. Final lesson: there's a moment when the world starts to reward you, applaud you, pay you, but that's not the real victory. The real victory is becoming the kind of person who kept showing up, even when no one noticed. That's when you've won. Because now, success isn't something you chase. It's something you carry. At the bottom of the page, he scribbled a quote from Napoleon Hill. The strongest oak tree of the forest is not the one protected from the storm, but the one that stands in the open where it is compelled to struggle for its existence against the winds and rains and the scorching sun. Daniel closed the journal. He was no longer the same man who started that first workshop. He was better, not because he got applause, but because he earned his own respect. End of part 6. Final, white heavy checkmark call to action. If this story inspired you, like, share, and subscribe to stay connected to more life-changing stories. And in the comments, tell us, what's the quiet progress you're making that the world hasn't seen yet? You're closer than you think. Keep going.